Okay, good afternoon everybody. Using Thingy in community services. I'm quite glad that I've called my presentation this, because watching other people struggle with, is it DRTS, is it the dementia unit, what's it called? We've had all of those problems. I've complained repeatedly to Fiona, so it's Thingy for the purposes of this afternoon. I'm from Age UK Wirral, for those of you that aren't familiar with Age UK, and I feel like a little bit of an imposter today, surrounded by so many colleagues from the NHS. We're an independent, local and autonomous organisation working exclusively across the borough of Wirral. We're a brand partner of Age UK, so we share the name and the logo, but we are completely independent. And we deliver about 80,000 interventions a year to people during various stages of later life from 50 upwards in a wide range of services. But our particular specialism is around working with people with dementia. So we provide daycare services for people aged 65 and over. We have a dedicated in-reach and outreach early onset dementia service, which works with people in their 30s, 40s and 50s with dementia. Carer support for those people caring for people with dementia. And we also have a dedicated respite and residential care home for people with dementia as well. We've had some challenges over the last few years. Today, in one of our daycare centres, I've got people who were born in 1914 and people who were born in 1964, all in daycare together. What do you put on the CD player? Do you listen to the White Cliffs of Dover yet again, or do you put Michael Jackson on? How long before we actually start playing the Spice Girls in daycare? So it was getting more and more difficult to provide something musically based that catered for everyone. We have a reminiscence lounge at the Devonshire Centre, our main daycare site. But what do you do every few years when the generations of people coming into daycare change? You know, we've got 6 different lounges here from 6 different decades. How do you actually keep on top of making sure that the resources that you're using with people with dementia stay relevant? So we were very much looking for a solution that made us more current, more relevant, but most importantly, something that actually helped us to work with everybody that was coming to us for our services. Some of our other challenges were around the very specific support needs of younger people with dementia. People were coming to us that were displaying much more aggressive behaviour, had a much reduced attention span, and some very, very specific challenges. We had some issues around group dynamics, particularly in our EMI daycare services, where it was very hard to keep group activities when we'd got somebody of 65 and somebody of 101 in that same group. And it was a real challenge for the staff to stay motivated and enthusiastic when, on a very, very, very scarce resource, we were asking them to constantly recycle and also upcycle the old resources that they had. That's when we came across My Dementia Improvement Network. Somebody went to a presentation and saw the unit, came back and said, we need to get this Fiona person into Age UK Wirral to show us what she's got. Not literally. So Fiona came along and a group of staff sat and road tested the system. We road tested Thingy, and we all felt that it would be something very appropriate for us to use. However, without actually getting the approval of people with dementia, we wouldn't have pursued it. So we got the toughest nut to crack. We got a gentleman called Ron, who's one of our younger people with dementia. He's in his late 50s and he's very, very vocal. He's not backwards and coming forward. And he is possibly one of the most challenging people we work with, and is known to be quite disruptive within group settings. So we took him along to the boardroom to meet Fiona, and Fiona demonstrated the unit to him. And he was actually the quietest I've ever seen him in the 8 years that we've been supporting him, because he was absolutely hooked. And within minutes, he was treating Fiona like a long-lost friend. He was reminiscing about different events in his life. And to us, that sealed for us the fact that this unit was something special. It was going to help us do something different with people with dementia. We initially purchased 2 units and 4 tablets for our 2 main sites. We now have, I think it's 5 units and countless tablets. And Fiona came along to do some training with some of the staff. I have to say, given that we were working with care staff who, as part of their day-to-day jobs, didn't actually use any form of IT whatsoever, I was quite nervous about whether or not staff would take to the system And I have to say, even some of the people that were very, very against the idea at the outset absolutely loved it. The impact in the 18 months that we've been using the technology has been really quite significant. It's had a massive impact on staff motivation and morale, predominantly because it's so easy to use, and it's also portable. It's not fixed to the wall. It can travel around to where it's needed to be. It's really captured the imagination of the staff, who are constantly wanting to do something better, wanting to do something different, but haven't actually had the resource so far to do so. It's provided them with more choice in terms of activities and ideas, and the feedback from staff is it's actually made their day jobs easier. It's made their day jobs in terms of providing meaningful resources and activities for people a lot easier to carry out. And it's also meant that a lot of our staff have got increased confidence now in using IT. And certainly since using the system, a number of them have said they've actually asked for iPads or tablets for Christmas or birthday presents because they've realised that actually technology is not quite as daunting as they first thought. What staff have told us is that the system is facilitating much better quality reminiscence through the visual prompts. Previously, whilst we had memory boxes, we had some reminiscence materials. A lot of the reminiscence work would be through either one-to-one or group discussion and conversation. And for some people within that group, actually talking about something wasn't enough to prompt that memory recall. Whereas actually being able to see things, hear things, and use a much broader range of senses using the system has actually enabled a lot more people to take part in reminiscence activity and has actually triggered a lot more memories for people. What's also been particularly useful is that within the system we can record what's worked best for an individual person. And for us that's quite important because we offer what we call the jigsaw of care for somebody with dementia. So the local hospital hold the memory clinics and nurse clinics within our buildings for people. So at the point of first diagnosis, it's not actually within a medical clinical setting, it's actually within one of our buildings. That enables them straight away to be introduced to our carer support team and have a very first point of contact for some community-based help and support. That's also an introduction then into the building if somebody later on needs daycare. We're able to provide domiciliary care at home, further down the line, and people are also then familiar with us in terms of coming to us for residential care and potentially respite care as well. So there can be a lot of movement of people within different parts of our organisation, within different venues. But by being able to record which different parts of this technology have worked best with people, it means that whichever member of care staff or support staff is engaged in working with someone at any one time, they're not having to start from scratch again. They're not having to try different activities to find what that particular person likes. They actually know straight away which one to go to and which one to use with people. The impact for service users has been absolutely immense and is actually quite emotional when you sit and watch some of the service users using the resource. It's provided a much different range of opportunities, a much wider range of opportunities. It's enabled far more individual and group interaction. There's the picture here of the pig race, and the pig racing is by far the most favourite activity out of all of the software. Pig racing is something in a million years we would never ever have thought of doing with a group of people with dementia. By understanding more about what small groups, individuals and larger groups enjoy doing collectively or on their own, we're able to then go about doing more person-centred work with them, whether that's using the system or actually going out and doing other activities where we've learned about what people are interested in through using Thingy. When we first struggled with the name and trying to write about it in newsletters and funding bids and things like that, it was getting more and more difficult. So we put a request out to all the staff and we said, look, you know, we've got these units and things, you're all using them, but we need a name so that we're all talking about the same thing. So we gave staff and volunteers the chance to actually come up with a name. The name that came up repeatedly, and I had to completely veto because it got a completely different meaning, was my touchy-feely friend. But there's absolutely no way we could say to a carer when they came to pick their loved one up from daycare, he's had a brilliant day with his touchy-feely friend. So we're back to the drawing board and we're still really struggling with names. For service users, it's really provided them with an alternative way to express their interests. It's not easy or possible for everybody to actually verbalise what they're interested in, what they like doing, what they dislike doing. But actually, by being able to use the images, the resources, all of the different thematic areas within Thingy, we're able to learn far more about what makes someone tick. What is it they're smiling at? What is it that's suddenly engaged their interest? What is it where they've turned away and wandered off and they haven't been so interested in? And we've actually learned far more about their interests and their wishes in the last 12 months than perhaps we will have done for a number of years beforehand working with them without the software. It's given service users much more confidence in using IT, in using technology. We're working with a group of people who probably haven't, when they were working, had to use IT, and who subsequently, because of their dementia, have probably shied away from IT. And we're now starting to see people who are incredibly confident, people who will come in and actually turn the unit on themselves and find the section that they want to use and are able to use it completely independently, and it doesn't actually need to be within part of a facilitated session. The freedom of the touch screen has worked particularly well for people with disabilities, people who've had a stroke, and there's a real reassurance for people when they realise that they're not going to break anything. And it's fascinating to actually sit and watch someone who's never used the system before navigate their way around it, get lost, but then actually be able to find their way back to where they wanted to be as well. And that's been a real confidence boost for people and really helped them to overcome some perceived barriers around technology. The other thing we've been able to do through particularly the music is actually predict where someone's mood is going and when someone's mood's about to change. And certainly within our work with our residential clients and our respite care clients, the music that they pick at any one point is actually a really strong indicator we're learning in terms of whether they're about to have a particularly challenging episode or an episode that we might find difficult to manage, or whether they're in quite a settled, calm mood and whether that's about to change. It's changed the dynamics quite significantly within our groups of clients, and particularly with younger people with dementia. We've found that through the technology, through the touch screen, through people being able to actually lead activities, through people being able to press the buttons for the quiz, and I agree with everyone that said that a couple of the answers are dubious. Our member of staff who always led on quizzes before we had this argues the toss over at least 3 of the answers and claims she's right. But then that's created a real comedy element to it as well, because it's been quite funny watching people bicker and argue about the answers, and that's really helped bond groups as well. But through some of the clients being able to lead that activity, through it not being our member of staff actually leading the activity, through that client pressing the buttons, moving on to the next question, that's really changed some of the dynamics within the group. It's created something where there's not a culture of power where the member of care staff seem to be more powerful than the clients. It's also helped to bring out some of the quieter clients and actually help them to integrate into groups, to start contributing within groups. And we've learned that when we've done things like quizzes in the past, some of the clients haven't actually understood that it is a quiz, that it's okay to shout out the answer. But actually by working with the system, by working with it being on screen as well as audio, it's worked really, really well. It's helped people to understand what the activity they're engaging is. And because of that, we've seen a much greater participation and enthusiastic participation in activities by everybody. We've seen some significant improvements in functional skills, largely due to people actually not just being receptive within activities, but actively being part of leading the activity, using the screen, touching the buttons, touching the screen. It's helped us reduce anxiety with some clients. I'll touch upon in a minute how we've used it as a distraction technique in a number of ways. And I think the most important thing for me is we've actually seen increased laughter within our care settings. People aren't just enjoying themselves, people are actually opening up memories that they're able to laugh about, that they're really genuinely enjoying. It's not just a tokenistic laugh and, oh, that was very nice and let's move on. people are having really quite high quality experiences, which is what we want life to be all about. We have various trigger points during the day where a number of people we work with, particularly within our daycare settings, can become quite unsettled or quite anxious, particularly if they see somebody else going home and it's not quite their time to go home. Forgive me for the spelling mistake on this slide. I spotted it this morning and I didn't get a chance to change it. So we've either been able to use the unit in a way in which it provides distraction because people become so engaged in it, they forget that they were actually getting worried about going home. Or we've actually been able to record relatives and loved ones' voices on the unit. And we have one particular gentleman who gets so upset that his daughter's forgotten to come and pick him up, that she's actually recorded and saved on the unit, just a little soundbite that just says, "Don't worry, Dad, I'll be there in 5 minutes." And after about 3 years of really struggling between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock, 5 days a week, with this person's behaviour, it's completely sorted it. Because as soon as they hear that voice, they're not worried anymore. They're quite happy. They've heard the daughter's voice. They know she's coming to pick them up later on. And we've also seen some improvements in cognitive skills. And certainly we think that's a lot to do with the quality of the conversation that using the unit has actually generated amongst people, and that increased active participation in the range of different activities. For carers and family members, it's really enabled people to find different ways of spending quality times with their loved ones. But as we all know, particularly when you're caring for somebody with dementia, it can become a 24/7 treadmill of challenging situations, exhausting situations. There's that constant pressure for carers, for family members, to try and correct the person with dementia, to get really quite stressed and anxious when the memory that they've got isn't actually quite how things really happened. And things like hobbies, things like high quality, meaningful time together is often what goes out the window first when you're having to start thinking about things such as personal care and thinking about the needs of both of you. This technology has actually enabled carers and family members to take a step back, to see their loved one doing something that they're really enjoying, and to spend some time enjoying something with them. And that might just be half an hour a week of someone's carer, someone's wife, when they come to pick them up from daycare, sitting and playing pig racing with them. But that might actually be the only half an hour in a week that they're actually doing something together. Or actually just sitting reminiscing when the carer comes in and we're able to say, well, actually today you was telling us all about that time when you went to such and such a place for holiday. And then that embarks this whole conversation for the next 20 minutes with the carer, and the carer starts reminiscing as well. Because I think a lot of the time we often think that reminiscence is very much about people with memory problems and helping them to remember times in their life. Actually, reminiscence has a therapeutic value for all of us, whether we've got a cognitive impairment or not. And certainly for carers, we've found that it's really helping to reduce their stress levels. It also means that some carers have come back to us and said, it's really made me go home and reevaluate the time we're spending at home and what we're doing together. And it's forced me to make sure that we do some activities together at home. And it's given the carers the confidence to go away and do that. Stimulated all sorts of discussion about hobbies, backgrounds and interests, to the point where there might be things that the person with dementia hasn't been able to tell us, but then in conversation with family members and friends later on, they've been able to add richness and add something extra to what we've learned about that individual during our session with them. And it's also just giving carers and family members reassurance that we genuinely are interested in the person and the person as a whole being and not just as a recipient of care. To the point where I now actually have people coming to me and asking if they can purchase daycare from us privately because they've heard about this wonderful stuff that we're doing with Thingy. After the first 6 months or so, the bit that was worrying us about the potential of the technology was that within daycare settings, we didn't have the time or resource to fully exploit the life collage and the life book side of the technology. So we decided that we wanted to pursue some money to actually make that side of the unit a dedicated project. And around the same time, Comet Relief and the Department of Health released the Panacoa report, which is the report that was jointly commissioned into looking at abuse within institutional care settings. And out of that came a funding pot administered by Comet Relief that was looking at piloting some different ways to tackle and prevent neglectful or disrespectful relationships in care homes and hospitals. And the two outcomes they were looking at were projects that improved community and relationships. So that was relationships between staff and residents and across the care home and the wider community. And looking at identity and meaning, so putting people's desires and experiences at the very heart of the care they received. And straight away what jumped out at us was we can use the collages, the life books to meet both of those outcomes. So we've actually now we were successful in that bid to Comet Relief. It's the only project being funded across the country under this funding stream that's using any sort of technology. Other projects are doing activities, but it's things like singing groups, reading groups. This is the only project that's using any sort of technology. So through the project, we're working with all of the residents that we have staying with us for respite care, which could be a short stay of just one night through to a couple of weeks, and also our permanent residential guests, to produce an interactive This Is Me collage prior to arrival at Meadowcroft, which is our residential centre, so that we've got a really in-depth picture of who that person is. And what we're finding is often people call them different things, this is me, all about me. Often actually it isn't all about me. Often it's somebody else telling somebody carrying out an assessment all about me. But it's not actually all about me, because it's not me that's put it together. With the technology, what we're able to do is make sure that it is all about me, because the majority of that comes from a reminiscence session working with the individual themselves, with then just some extra dimensions added by family members and friends. So hopefully out of that we get a much better understanding at the very outset of who that person is. Because it's electronic, it's a living thing. As well as printing it and laminating it and having it in every single room, it's something that we can keep changing as we learn more about that individual. And I think in the past, when we've done things like hard copy life books and things, once you've produced it, you kind of assume that's it, that's that person's life. Well, actually, some people are saying that life begins at 70, and if you've produced your life book at 69, what happens to everything you do and achieve in your life from 70 to 80, 90, 100? And so we're finding that having it electronic, having it on the unit means that little things that crop up, little extra snippets that we learn, little things that happen, we're able to keep adding to the unit. Once people are staying with us or living with us, the project worker is then working with them to actually build their interactive life book. We've purchased digital photo frames for every single one of our guests' bedrooms, so that each stage of their life book, we can put it on a memory stick, we can plug it in within their bedroom, and it's constantly revolving in the room. So it's an ongoing discussion point between care staff and the residents. It's something which is living and not sitting on that shelf gathering dust. It's the equivalent of that well-thumbed book. The more we learn from people then, we're able to start looking at interactive reminiscence events, working with groups within residential care. And we've seen significant changes in terms of the way in which staff are now thinking about what to do with residents, the way in which family members are coming and spending time with residents, and particularly significant impacts around grandchildren and their grandma or granddad with dementia. People are finding it a cathartic process. Only last week we had a lady who actually buried both of her sons in their early 30s and hadn't really been given time to grieve or explore that before she was diagnosed with dementia, deteriorated quite quickly and ended up in residential care. No one knew about her sons. It'd never come up in any sort of assessment because nobody had ever asked. They'd asked if she'd got any family. Well, she hasn't now because her two sons have died. And it had never actually come up in any sort of assessment. We didn't know about it until we were using the unit and doing some reminiscence with her, and suddenly all of this came out. But it's actually for her been one of the most positive experiences because she's been able to enjoy talking about their childhood, enjoy talking about the times that she's had with them. We've found that a lot of younger grandchildren are actually less fearful now of coming to see grandma or granddad in respite, in residential care, because there's something of common interest through being able to use the touchscreen technology. A couple of weeks back I heard one, I think he was about 6 or 7, little lad, on the way out, went, "Grandad's so cool, he's got an iPad in his room," and he was absolutely made up. But it's created something where they can sit and do things together. And for grandchildren who are perhaps missing out on some of that grandparent-grandchild relationship because of the dementia, it has the potential to provide a really long-lasting resource for people and a legacy for people after the person with dementia has gone. Within its first 2 months, that project had been so successful that we decided to try and replicate that in another piece of work we do around ex-seafarers. We're already involved in some work with retired male seafarers in a mariners retirement village in Wirral called Mariners Park. And they recently have opened a specific dementia care centre for former seafarers. And there's an awful lot of issues within the ex-seafaring community around alcohol substance misuse, and alcohol-related dementias and things. So there's quite a lot of people within this care home. Based on the success that we've had within the park at engaging men, we put an application into Seafarers UK, who funded us for a second member of staff to work exclusively with the technology to look at life books and life collages with people with dementia of maritime heritage living in this care home at Mariners Park. And that's going to be really interesting work, because that's a group of people where there's some quite significant issues around engagement. It's a group of people who often haven't married and don't have families. So in terms of isolation and loneliness within that communal care home setting, it's actually quite high. But it's also a group of people who, if you think of the age of some of those people in their 70s, 80s, 90s, unlike other older people who perhaps had a job round the corner from where they lived and didn't really get to travel in their 20s, 30s, 40s unless you were particularly well off, this is a group of people who've travelled the world. It's a group of people who have been involved in all sorts of fantastic history that we all benefit from now. But they're a group of people who are slowly dying off. And this is a chance to actually record some living history as well as engage in some fascinating reminiscence work with them. It's going to really help the care staff at Mariners Park who don't have a maritime heritage really appreciate the background of the people that they're caring for. And we think through this project it's going to make an absolutely massive difference to the care that can be provided in the future to people with dementia who've come from a seafaring background. That's what we're doing with the technology. I've been sat at the back listening to what everyone's been talking about today and reflecting a little bit on something somebody said right in one of the very first presentations, and this idea of a moral obligation. And there's something that's come across really quite strongly to me today in terms of whether you're here from an NHS organisation, you're here from a voluntary organisation such as myself, we're all facing all of these same challenges. We're all talking about budget cuts, we're all talking about resources, we're all feeling the effects of the ageing population and the population that we've kept so fit and active that there's just more and more people to support. We've all talked today about the about activities, about meaningful experience, about the making sure that people aren't just sitting there feeling isolated, feeling lonely. And people have asked about innovation and what we can all do and things like that. And I actually just sitting at the back reflected before lunch and thought, actually the moral obligation from today for me is, whilst we perhaps can't change it all overnight across the whole of the health and social care economy, there's something we can all do as individuals about going back into our own families, our own circle of friends, and actually just taking that bit more time with people that we know, people that we perhaps don't ever sit and just have that chat with and just reflect a little bit. And I actually think if we all go away and do that and actually start from our own communities, we might actually see a lot less people being admitted to hospital because they're isolated, because they're lonely. We might all have a much better understanding of what works and what doesn't work. So it's just a thought to reflect on. Thank you.